Hey guys, thanks for coming back to listen to our videos. So we both listened to this seminar by a guy named Basil Vanderkolk. So this is his book, The Body Keeps the Score. It's a really famous book. It's like one of the best sellers for the New York Times. So I encouraged Dustin to listen to it so we could kind of discuss it together. So this guy is one of the big names with trauma counseling and trauma in general. So he's a very informed voice as we try to navigate these times that we're living in. So one of his tips was to try to manage the unpredictability of our times. So my question for you, Dustin, is how has your schedule changed since the quarantine has taken place?
Oh, it's changed quite a bit. When it initially happened, I just lost all aspects of time where I found myself sleeping in later. I found myself going to bed later. I'd kind of meander through my workday. What I have started to do, one is prioritize exercise. So every day, roughly the same time, I'm trying to do some exercise. Have started to try to have a set bedtime, have tried to start getting up at a same regular time, having certain work things scheduled. My wife and I have been scheduling walks when it's been weather permitting, and then really prioritizing spiritual discipline practices when I wake up and go to bed.
Yeah, so there's like stuff that you can put in throughout the day. Since we were all like on such a set routine, like clockwork before, and then now the quarantine is set in, now you might have to put on your calendar shower or
Yeah.
play with the pets or go walking, like stuff that wasn't really on there before. So that's kind of like a day to day thing, kind of. It might feel like in the beginning you're kind of micromanaging your day, but that's kind of what you have to do to keep things moving and to stay productive and things like that, especially like if you have work responsibilities and everything. But then there's also like a day to day routine. So you're like, well, it's Friday and who cares? Like it doesn't feel like a weekend anymore or anything like that. So like, I think my social calendar, I have like an old school calendar in my kitchen that I like write everything on. It looks so different now than it did in the past. So now, like the activities I end up writing on there are like Zoom meetings or
Yeah.
having lunch with a friend is like us both eating on camera.
Yeah.
So
But it's
weird.
remarkable how those have actually been something we look forward to.
Yeah, I recently made a video on how to talk to someone who's having suicidal thoughts.
Mm.
And one of the most important questions to ask those people is, "What are you looking forward to?" And like looking for some sort of like future orientation, hope
Yep.
for the future, even if it is like meeting a friend to like eat over video or like in the age of social distancing, I've met some people in parking lots and like my friend stays in her car, I stay in my car and we talk that way. But having those like little kind of dates and things that you can look forward to helps. But like with me, with all these days blending together and stuff, sometimes I'm like, oh man, when was the last time my daughter had a bath? Like, I don't know. So that, like, full disclosure, that's something that I have to have like on a calendar or to like make certain days do that. So I like know that day's responsibility because it's so easy to just like let minutes turn into hours and then whoops, we're at bedtime. And so like, we'll give you a bath tomorrow. So that's just like a little bit of my struggle. I have
Yeah,
to
and I
think.
think, yeah, and this is, I think it underscores one of the aspects that we're doing these videos is there is an intersection between our mental health and our spiritual health, and
Mhm.
I actually believe that scheduling is one of the most prominent areas that a routine, a sense of ritual, is spiritual. For some folks, it might feel binding, it might feel cumbersome, but it actually is something that frees us when we
Yeah.
look at uh, the scriptures. God seems to have a rhythm, right? There's
Mhm.
these 6 days
Mhm.
of work and then a rest. Jesus and his ministry goes and engages with people in serving, and then he withdraws. And this
Mhm.
rhythm that's there gives us meaning. It gives us health, and I think that's. I've used this analogy and I've heard this analogy a million times, but that's the difference. That's what makes some sound noise and some sound music, is that
Oh,
organization of
yeah.
repetition and rhythm put to it. Sound is just air movement going into our ear canal that gets transmitted to electrical signals to our brains. If there's no pattern to it, if there's no structure to it, it's just white noise and we just kind of ignore it. But when
Mhm.
there's an actual pattern to it, it's music and it gives us meaning. And so I think
Cool.
that's
Yeah.
something that is a bit allegorical, but I think might help some folks in this time. We find ourselves in trauma and it feels like meaning is lost. But something as seemingly insignificant as scheduling your daughter's bath can be
Right.
something that's profoundly important, gives us hope, gives us meaning in
Sure.
this time.
Yeah. So as you know, I see a lot of couples with my counseling. So talking with couples about how important it is to schedule different activities, a lot of times I get pushback on that because they say, well, if we schedule it, then it's not spontaneous and it doesn't mean
Right,
as much. So
right,
as you're talking about like the spiritual aspect of it, I could see a lot of people saying, well, if I put, a calendar event of like prayer or Bible or solitude, whatever the discipline is, then it doesn't mean as much because it's not as spontaneous. But
mm,
um, the way I respond to couples when they say, no, we don't want to schedule date night or whatever because it should be spontaneous all the time. I'm like, okay, yeah, it would be nice if it were spontaneous all the time. But a lot of times that stuff that's like important to us goes to the wayside because we don't make it a priority to set time apart and it ends up getting eaten up. So I always talk about like a paradox mindset. So let's say a lady comes home from work and she tells her husband, hey, my coworker's husband takes her out to the movies every Friday night. I think that would be amazing if you took me out to the movies every Friday night. And her husband's like, okay, file that away in my brain. So Friday comes and the husband's like, hey, we should go to the movies. And she's like, I'm not going anywhere with you. The only reason you're inviting me out is because I told you to and I said I wanted to. You should have asked without me asking. You should be spontaneous. So it's bad if he invites her to the movies, and then it's bad if he doesn't, because then he's the bad guy who forgot. So avoiding these kind of paradoxes, whether it's with a spouse or significant other, or whether it's with God, I think can help a lot. And like you have to kind of understand some stuff has to be scheduled.
yep.
And just because it's scheduled doesn't mean that it's not something that you care about or it's not something that is spontaneous. It's just something that you're putting as a higher priority. I think that's my biggest tip for now is to keep things on a schedule. Don't be afraid to add stuff to your schedule that you wouldn't have added before. Your schedule's probably so jam packed before all this happened that you didn't even think about putting walk or like call a friend or set this up, play with a pet, different things like that. So yeah, I think all of us could do well to add some little tasks to our thing, and then with spiritual life, not being afraid to schedule things like just as you would with a couple. So
That-
be careful
that's
of the
great.
paradoxes.
Yes, it is. Absolutely. So, thanks, Aleesa, for sharing this. Friends, we hope that this is life giving to you and that this gives you a practical tip to build in some sort of routine, some sort of rhythm into your life that will help during this time of quarantine. So, we thank you so much for watching and we'll see you soon.